Hello and welcome to Motherhood Uncovered's Intro to Solid Foods for Your Infant. We are so excited to have you all here today for this exciting topic. We have an awesome, incredible guest expert speaker to talk to you who will introduce to you in just a couple of minutes. So thanks so much for joining us today. The first thing we want to do is to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. Pardon the slide issues. Hold on just a second. Wanted to tell you a little bit about how to ask a question during this event. So if you haven't joined us before, we'll just give you a quick overview. If you go onto the YouTube page that you're on watching this now, either to the right of the video or below the video, depending on which browser you are in, you can actually leave a comment or ask a question. So we will attempt to address these at the end of the event today live. And of course, if we can't get to them or you join us late, you're still welcome to ask a question. And our wonderful expert has agreed to try to answer those as follow-up in the coming days. So be sure to ask a question. We would love to address that. If you have any questions you don't want to share publicly or just general questions about Motherhood Uncovered and the events that we hold, feel free to email us. Our email addresses are here on the screen, to myself, Sarah Wells, or to Nicole, and we will follow up with you. Also, we wanted to make sure you knew that this is actually actively being recorded, so the video webinar will be forever archived at this link. You're welcome to pause it, restart it, rewatch it, and of course we would love it if you would share it with your friends or put it on your blog or website. So again, for those who may be somewhat new to Motherhood Uncovered, this may be your first event, just wanted to take a moment and tell you a little bit about what it is and who we are. Motherhood Uncovered is an ongoing series of free educational webinars for expecting and new moms or second-time around moms, really any mom, as well as supporters of moms. Created by Nicole Zollner of Wear Nursing Bras and myself, Sarah Wells of Sarah Wells Breast Pump Bags. And our goal is to bring to you the best information on a wide range of topics that matter to moms in a succinct and straightforward way. We also love to use this opportunity to introduce you to some of the coolest mom and baby products around, often from other small businesses that Nicole and I have met along the way, and you'll get to hear about one of these in just a minute. So I'm actually going to switch over to the video of myself here. Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Wells. I thought I would just take a second to tell you a little bit about myself and my business. Again, I'm the CEO and founder of Sarah Wells Breast Pump Bags. I created my product, the stylish and functional breast pump bag, out of my own dissatisfaction with a pretty ugly and bag that was lacking in a lot of function. The black vinyl tote that you might know of that comes from a pump manufacturer. Carried that back to work when I ended maternity leave and was really frustrated that I didn't have a better way to carry my breast pump. And considering myself to be somewhat of a fashionable mother, I wanted something that was also a lot more stylish. So I developed a stylish functional breast pump bag. Would love for you to check them out. They're available at sarahwellsbags.com or Amazon because I know how much moms love Amazon. I'd love to also introduce my Motherhood Uncovered co-founder, Nicole Zollner of Wear Nursing Bras. I'm going to switch over to Nicole here and let her tell you a little bit about herself. Nicole, I think you're on mute still.
Oh, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Nicole Zollner, and I am the founder and CEO of Wear Nursing Bras, as Sarah mentioned before. We have the only nursing bra with a patented pocket, and our pocket holds molded pads and provides mom with a little lining when they want it to cover up nipples, nursing pads, light leaks, provides great shape as well, and it also gives you the ability to take them out when you don't want it. The pocket can also safely hold a warm or cool pack that provides relief to any breastfeeding discomfort that you might experience. The idea for Wear came from my personal experience breastfeeding my son. His latch looked great from the outside, but what was going on the inside was a different story. To make a long story short, I soon became cracked and bleeding, but with the help of a great lactation consultant, we were able to continue to successfully breastfeed. This experience fueled the idea that every nursing bra should have a pocket, and Wear was born. If you'd like to hear more about our story or check out our products, you can go to our website at nizaware.com. We are also on Amazon as well. And as Sarah mentioned, we are both very passionate about bringing to light topics that mothers often encounter but are not always talked about out loud. We're so excited to be helping to do just that with this next informational webinar in our series, Introducing Solid Foods. But first, I'd like to take a quick minute to share with you the details about this event, their giveaway for today. Everyone has a chance to win a Baby Dipper Bowl spoon fork set of their choice and color, and another lucky winner will be receiving a half-off nutrition consultation with our expert today, Miss Lindsey Hurd. In addition, as a bonus for registering, we are so excited to announce that everyone will be receiving a coupon for a Skype nutrition consult. Make sure you're registered so that you can receive this exclusive deal from us. You don't want to miss out. While we're talking about prizes, I'd like to give a big thank you to the sponsor for today's event, Baby Dipper Bowl, which you could see on the PowerPoint there. If you've not heard of Baby Dipper Bowl, let me tell you a little bit about this amazing mom-invented product. The Baby Dipper Bowl means true one-handed feeding of babies. As parents, I'm sure you have at some point, if you're like me, wished for an extra hand. Well, this bowl eliminates the need, making your life just a little bit more efficient, which we could all use. This bowl also helps toddlers feed themselves. And if you have a toddler, you know what I mean when that's a wonderful benefit in itself. The unique design combines the features of a non-slip base, transparent sides, a slanted interior surface that leads to a spoon-shaped corner for collecting the food. So if you've not already done so, please check out their website at babydipper.com. Now on to our guest speaker, Miss Lindsey Hurd. Lindsey Hurd is a registered dietitian, international board-certified lactation consultant, and owner of Angel Food Lactation and Nutrition, LLC. She began her career in exercise science and nutrition, providing a pediatric nutrition counseling while establishing her private practice. Currently, her business offers nutrition and lactation counseling from preconception through preschool via Skype, home, and office visits. She holds a certificate of training in food allergy management and is specialized in counseling moms with food intolerant and food allergic children via breast milk and solid food intake. Additionally, she is trained in prenatal yoga, bringing the benefits of mindfulness, empowerment, and physical practice to her clients. Lindsey offers professional training and seminar presentation and has spoken for many different audiences, professionals and parents alike. Lindsey is specialized in topics related to food sensitivities, enhancing maternal diet in pregnancy and lactation, complementary feeding, obesity prevention, exercise planning, and nutrition support for health concerns from preconception to preschool. To learn more about Angel Food Lactation and Nutrition, visit her website listed there, and you can also find her Facebook page at the same name, Angel Food Lactation and Nutrition. So thank you so much, Lindsey, for being here with us today and taking the time out of your schedule to share your wonderful knowledge. I know that we are all anxiously looking forward to hearing what you have to say, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone, and I'm excited to have all the listeners and those to come to tag along as well. So first, I guess, this is probably one of my most favorite topics within this talk is the concept of flavor learning. So oftentimes we think about when is the beginning of complementary feeding? When does solid feeding start? And I really like to think about the kind of very basic beginning being really even in pregnancy, but primarily in lactation, and how mom's food and her intake really flavors the milk and the palate, I guess, of the baby, so that they are really learning to enjoy and appreciate the foods that the mom is eating. And so it's just this really cool concept. So babies, really begin to develop these senses early on in utero as well, and then continue through lactation. And really this is the first beginning. So mom's diet can be a huge role in really helping the baby to expand their palate and learn to appreciate lots of different foods. There's a really cool study that looked at moms who ate a lot of carrots and carrot-based foods, and they took samples in her pregnancy of her amniotic fluid, and it actually smelled like the carrots. So you can really see how once the babies begin to swallow in utero and learn to develop those skills, they're already kind of exposing themselves to the flavors of the foods that mom eats. They also took samples after the baby was born of mom's milk, and found the same thing to be true, that the carrots were very present in the mom's milk. And once the baby began solid foods, they were very drawn to the meals that contained carrots, or I guess blended foods that had that component in it. So it's really cool to think of how we can really help to shape the foods that our little ones will love to enjoy. And it makes a lot of great sense to know that, you know, they are learning what's ideal in their environment.
So that's great, Lindsey. I had no idea. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very cool to see how, you know, they can adjust that. Let's see. I'm trying to see. Can I click this green to pull the slides up that you guys are showing? Was that how that works? Okay, perfect. Now switched. I can see what you guys see now. Okay, so these are kind of the main senses that we have in terms of our taste or our flavor learning capabilities. So taste is really just the actual stimuli that's dissolved by the saliva. So our tongue, you know, perceives these flavors. So the sweet, salty, bitter, you know, the kind of main ones that we're familiar with, that's what we consider taste. Smell also plays a huge role in flavor learning as well. And if you've ever had a cold where your nose was really stopped up and you were not able to taste anything, it's kind of how that plays a role, you know, to be able to have, you know, the chemicals and odorants of foods that we eat to kind of contribute to the way that we perceive a flavor. And then also something called chemosensory irritation, which is kind of a special name for the perceptions that we have with our nerve endings. So like when you eat a pepper and it's hot, and sometimes, you know, you get that really hot, almost you could sweat sometimes, and then the same when you eat a cucumber, and even if it's not cold, it kind of feels cold to you in your mouth. And then mustard is another example. Mustard seeds can also play into those concepts, I guess. So you can see how there are lots of different, I guess, attributes that are being developed in a child's ability to learn flavors and to appreciate them and enjoy them. So it's definitely a complex you know, skill that they're learning very early on. So it's very cool to have this slow progression for them. So as you can see on this chart, it really starts in utero with the amniotic fluid. So babies, you know, being exposed to flavors from mom's diet in pregnancy, that transferring into flavors from her breast milk, you know, in her diet there. And so the nursing baby and also the weaning infant is, you know, being exposed to these flavors and learning them. And then moving on down the line and into having a child or an adult that accepts a lot of different foods in a variety, you know, similar to their environment early in their life. So you can see that, you know, the key to all this really sometimes ends up being the mom's diet. So, you know, really consuming those healthy foods, expanding your palate, and maybe this is something that you can work on in pregnancy, or maybe the next time around if your baby is already here. But, you know, you have great opportunity to really work on that within your own diet so that your baby can be more accepting and tolerating a lot of different foods. But, you know, that also doesn't mean that, you know, there's not the opportunity for a cake or for a cheeseburger. That is perfectly fine and you know, to be expected. This is just kind of generally speaking. So, you know, really working towards improving your diet to be well balanced and you know, containing all different types of foods. So as you can see, this little face, sometimes, you know, we get babies that are like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Everything's been going great. I've been, you know, feeding at mom's breast for all this time. Everything's great. That's my new happy place. And in comes the solids talk oftentimes, and they're like, wait a minute, what are you trying to do to me? And, you know, then they're having to retrain themselves to learn a new skill. And oftentimes, you know, they're showing interest, and we'll talk about some of those developmental cues in a little bit. But, you know, they at first are just a little bit perplexed with what's going on. So just because your baby is approaching that time period when maybe friends and family are starting to ask, have you introduced solids yet? Maybe your pediatrician brings this up at your well checks. And, you know, just because the conversation begins doesn't always mean that baby is ready to begin solids. Can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So there's a couple things to consider first. So the AAP, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics, recommends gradually introducing solids around 6 months. So if you think of those first feedings being very, very small, we can kind of understand that this slow progression where those solid foods actually provide a lot of nutrition that the baby needs really takes a while. So just because those solids begin doesn't mean that it becomes a staple or a huge chunk of your baby's nutrition. The milk that they're receiving will still provide the primary source of nutrition through the age of 1, and then, you know, starting to become, you know, more of a half and half ratio after that point. So if you look at the next, you know, 6 months of your baby's life, it's really just learning the skill of eating, learning to expand their palate, you know, really exploring those foods, kind of like arts and crafts. But, you know, so it's really a progression. So it should last throughout the first 2 years, and then the breast milk or formula should be the primary source of nutrition. So I think that's a big misconception, that once the solids begin, that, you know, we need to continue increasing and increasing. And oftentimes we'll find that babies start to drop off on their growth charts because we've replaced this really high calorie food with something that is very low in calories, because oftentimes it's like the one single foods, the green beans, the sweet peas, you know, carrots, if you will. So all of those foods are very low in calories, and definitely not an equivalent to the breast milk or formula that they're receiving. So food should focus on that developing skill. So how do we know when a baby is ready to eat? So we're kind of approaching that 6-month mark. What signs should we look for in our baby for them to tell us that they're approaching the developmental readiness? So the baby can play an active part in the feeding and shows interest. You know, when we have babies that are very passive, and you'll see, you know, you put a spoon to their mouth with some food on it, and they're not really sure what to do with it. And, you know, you can put it in their mouth and then they end up spitting it out, which is the tongue thrust reflex, which is often what we call it. They're just not able to really process and understand what they're supposed to do with that food. So we want to find that interest. And it's kind of tough because during this stage for babies, they're interested in putting everything to their mouth. So it's hard to decide whether it's interest in food or just interested in tasting something, because it's this new object, and their best way to figure out what it is to put it to their mouth. So really, you know, being mindful of having them at the table, allowing them to watch you eat, and then you may find that their cues to you are a little bit different than they would be with toys. A huge one is for them to be able to sit up alone or with minimal support. So really having that trunk control, so that when they're sitting there, they're not folding forward and their head's tipping down. And, you know, if you think of trying to swallow something with your head tipped down, that can be very challenging, and it definitely is for babies, especially when they're learning how to process this food. And really learn how to swallow it, because it's much different than feeding from the breast or a bottle. So using their muscles in their neck to hold their head up straight, mouthing their fingers and toys, and in a way that maybe looks much different than they did before. Opening his mouth when he sees food coming, so accepting that food. You know, that's a big thing that I think even once they begin solids, really honoring their ability to kind of tell you when they want some and when they don't, instead of encouraging the forced feeding habits that are so common, and you know, most of the time we're not even aware that it's happening. You know, it's just how we perceive feeding a baby. So it's very different when they're kind of the ones leading the way with quantity. They're able to turn their head away when they're kind of finished and don't want another bite. Once again, a very important skill to have, so that we don't kind of enter that arena of overfeeding. And then ability to keep their mouth open at will, keep their tongue flat and low, so when you put the spoon in their mouth, they don't spit all the content out, like I mentioned before. That's a good indicator that the baby is not ready. And many babies, when they begin solids at that 3 or 4 month period, you will find that, and you may see that in friends or family members, children who are beginning solids. They spit that out. And it's really also a good indicator that at the beginning of their digestion, which is their mouth, is not ready for this food, it's also a sign that maybe their insides of their digestive system are not quite ready to process this food. So even if you can get a little bit down, it's best just to wait and wait till they're ready to be able to digest that food well. Closing their lips over the spoon is important to help scrape the food off, keep the food in their mouth, and you know, just it's good to wait, like I said, until you know, they can really allow to have extra food within their diet that's kind of lower in calories. So waiting until their birth weight has doubled if there has been any concern with weight gain previously, because like I said, that takes up space in their stomach and it's much less calories than breast milk or formula.
I'm so glad you bring up this point, Lindsey, because oftentimes as moms, we try to stick to the book, and especially first-time parents, we just don't quite know. And what you're saying makes complete sense to me, but I never thought about it till you brought it up. And you know, oftentimes, like you said, we go to the doctor's appointments and they say, "Have you started solids?" And if you haven't, you think, "Oh gosh, I should be," you know. But you're right. I love how you're kind of saying, kind of follow your instincts and follow what your baby is, and that's how being a new parent, that's how you learn. And that should be the basis, and that's great information.
Definitely, yeah. You know, I always say I have a lot of information on a professional level, but the mom is always the expert in her baby, and they have a partnership that I, you know, as an outsider don't always understand. And so the mom's intuition, the baby's signs that they're sharing with the mom, all of that is so important, and I think that you should really just honor that sense in yourself, and definitely, you know, do what you feel is right, and also acknowledging that it's not a, okay, we started solids, now we got the 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, you know, just going straight into an adult feeding pattern. That's not to be expected. So something great to think about there. It kind of takes the pressure off, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next slide, just, you know, think of it as arts and crafts, like I mentioned before. You know, they're touching, they're feeling, they're smelling. Putting food in their mouth and spitting it out is very common. It's all a part of the process of learning new tastes, new textures. It's something that can be very enjoyable for children, especially, you know, when it's in an environment that allows them to control the quantity, the timing, you know, how long they want to feed, whether or not they're choosing to engage in that solid food. So I think it's very important to, like I said, let the baby lead, work as a team, and let it be fun. You know, if you keep in mind that it's not for nutrition, you know, it can really allow you to take some of that pressure off and trying to get them to eat those foods. So what's first? Where did this concept of babies need solids at 6 months come from? So when we've done some research studies and looking at certain nutrient levels in babies, we're finding that around that 6 to 8 month period is when some of the key nutrients and minerals and vitamins start to kind of decline in terms of their storage capacity within the baby's body. So iron and zinc, vitamin D and E, the fatty acids, so their needs are exceeding what they're currently getting within either the breast milk or the formula that they're receiving. So it doesn't mean that those two sources of nutrition are inadequate. You know, they're exactly what they need. They're perfect, but we just need to start moving towards some supplemental feedings to provide extra nutrients for their needs over time, if that makes sense. So, you know, it's not that all of a sudden at 6 months your breast milk is inadequate. It's just that we need to start the process of adding in other foods that will provide the complementary nutrients that they will need as their stores continue to kind of deplenish, if you will. So all of these nutrients are kind of the first ones that we look to for babies within that kind of 6 to 8 month time period. Okay, good for the next slide. Perfect. So iron fortified rice cereal, you know, that's kind of the first thing that we hear about. What the first food is always, I'll give them rice cereal. So, you know, where did that come from? Well, iron is one big mineral that we look for because when levels are very deficient, and a baby has anemia, it can really play a lot of negative effects into their cognitive development. So something that's very important. And once they're deficient, they're really kind of moving down this path of not being able to recover. So that being the case, being one of the most important nutrients or minerals, we have, the iron fortified rice cereal. So it's something that can be made very thin. So if you think early on, before we really acknowledged that 6 months was the appropriate start time for solids, we were really feeding babies solid food before they were ready to tolerate that food. And so making it very thin and liquid-like was really the only way to get that food into the baby so that they could kind of swallow it in the same way that they would other liquids. So that's kind of one concept behind where the rice cereal came from. And also, rice is a very low allergenic food, and so to be able to apply extra nutrients and fortify something, they would want to choose something that was pretty low on the allergen list, if you will. But they've just pretty much fortified the cereal with all those kind of special attention nutrients that we mentioned before. So that's really the main kind of beginning or push for this for the rice cereals as being the first food, but there are many other ways to achieve the special attention nutrients without having to choose this as the first food. And it's very processed food. All the nutrients have been added back to it, or they've been fortified, which means they've just added the nutrients regardless of whether it was there to begin with. So when we're really kind of thinking about expanding the flavors, expanding that whole food kind of palette, this really is kind of going against, everything that we know about the ability to flavor learn and to kind of expand those flavors and really learning them as a food and not just a flavor through their mom's milk or in pregnancy. So if there's a concern with iron, you can always use pureed baby meats to kind of enhance the iron content of their diet without having to choose a rice cereal. And depending on the stage of the baby, it could be very pureed all the way up to small pieces of soft meat. So that kind of depends on the stage of the baby. But if you're concerned, or if the pediatrician's really kind of harping on this concept to you in your visits, just ask them to check their iron levels. It's a very simple little prick, and so it's a pretty fast test that they can do. And then if the levels are fine, then that really kind of lowers your need to push this nutrient or this food, if you will, on the babies, and choosing one of the other introductory foods that we'll look at in a couple minutes. We can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So the big question, homemade versus jarred food, right? So, I think it's kind of, this concept of time. There's a concept of what do I fix? How do I do it? When will I do this in my day? And I think that that's a big thought for all families, regardless of whether it's solid foods for baby or, adult foods for a new family. You're kind of in this fast food pattern, and then all of a sudden you're cooking every night, and it's like, wait a minute, I do not have time for this. When can I fit this in? So it's kind of a similar concept. We're trying to work towards that more whole food diet, more balanced, healthy lifestyle. It takes a little bit of time. There's not many ways to get around that. However, being organized in the process and really, eating or pureeing or mashing the foods that the family is eating is a great way, because remember, they're being exposed to foods from the family. So, kind of progressing on that and providing them foods from the family is really kind of a good way to lead them into eating the family meals without them having something separate always, which definitely, as they age, can become more cumbersome. And you're having to fix 3 different meals for everyone in the family, and that can be very tough. So, picking the vegetables or the grains that you're having from your diet, that evening, and kind of processing that a little bit so that they are able to consume that can definitely be a great first start. Otherwise, on the weekend, maybe pick an afternoon when you kind of steam down some different fruits and vegetables and really prepare them ahead of time, so that way, busy morning before work, you're dropping the kids off at daycare or at school, you can have the food already ready so that it's not something that you have to prepare every single day. Ice trays are a great way to, have small portions of the certain foods for your baby. There are lots of other cool items that can kind of portion out babies' foods and freezing them. So definitely check into that. I think that's probably the best idea for trying to get things done ahead of time so that it's very easy throughout the week. But overall, remember this stage is very short, and to have the baby to continue to expand and learn a lot of different flavors is so very important, and to just have a couple extra hours of a job, for a handful of weeks or, even a month or two, really is such a huge benefit to your child long term. So definitely, find what works in your schedule and for your family, and, try your best to get that schedule going so that you're able to continue to expand the palate of your baby. But, and there are times when jars are necessary, and I think I did a little bit of an analysis of the different types of baby foods, and I really found that the single foods were kind of just that, they were the single foods, but when it became into the mixed meals, so like the spaghettis and lasagnas and all of those kind of stage 3 foods, there are a lot more additives in those foods. So when the jars are necessary, maybe sticking to kind of the single foods so that you're kind of reducing some of those additives. And they have lots of pouches now and other frozen baby meals, which will also reduce some of the additives because of the way that they are packaged being frozen. So definitely something else to consider.
I like the reminder that you said, Lindsey, about the time is short, the time frame. I think as parents we get in it and we think, is this ever going to end? And so that's a good reminder it will. Before you know it, it will be ending.
Definitely, yeah. And if you think you make a good chunk of a lot of different foods early on, well, if it only lasts a couple months, you could almost make as much as you need at one time. Now, I've not heard too many people doing that, but with the timing the way that it is, you really can kind of get things going. And maybe that's a great job for a grandma or a friend or someone who's so very willing to help. They just need a little bit of direction and guidance in providing the foods. So
that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
I love it.
Definitely. So starter foods being kind of those single foods. And I think a good way to look at this is kind of from that sensory angle. So you throw in a new concept of chewing or processing a food in your mouth. So that's, one thing that's new. You throw in a new flavor that's, very pure compared to experiencing that flavor in mom's milk. The different foods have different textures and different flavors. If you get something with a little bit of that chemosensory irritation, then they've got something kind of tingling in their nose that's a little bit different. So there's a whole lot going on with every bite of a solid feeding experience. So when we really think of kind of going back to basics and allowing the baby to have the opportunity to experience all of these senses and to enjoy it, it really takes a little bit of time in allowing them to experience each food one by one. So, and, we have this concern that may be a little bit old, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but about the allergy risk of introducing too many foods at one time. But I think a lot of it really goes down to almost sensory overload when we're offering so many new flavors, new textures, new experiences, and oftentimes we find that babies are like, forget this altogether, I am done with this is too much, I can't handle it, they begin to shut down. And then when we have feedings that are not led by the baby, then we have more of that forced feeding environment going on. And it's just very negative for baby, very negative for mom or dad, whoever's feeding baby. So it just kind of becomes this very stressful situation that's, definitely not necessary. So really stopping and thinking about what's going on. A bite of of carrots is not the same to them as it is to us. So really allowing them the opportunity to learn how to eat, learn how to process the foods, taste them. So giving them, plenty of time to expand their palate for the pure source of food. So going a few days providing the same food, they're not going to get bored with it, because for the first 6 months of their life, they've had the exact same source of food. So, if you think about it, they're not like us. They don't want something different for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They've always had the same, and will continue to get that. So keeping that in mind, it's another good important point. So mixed meals, kind of giving them a little bit of time. Now, all these time frames on these slides are very flexible. It really depends on your baby, how well they tolerate the foods, how ready they are for different textures, and so you really need to look to your baby to tell you when the appropriate time is to switch into adding more flavors within the meals. And be mindful of it. Maybe you give a couple single food feedings in the day and a couple mixed food feedings in the day. So that way they're able to, slowly get to multiple mixed food feedings in the day. Baby-led weaning is a huge topic that, is becoming very frequent in my classes and in my consults. And I think that, the concept is dead on in that, we should be feeding our children or our babies foods that are within our diet. I think the biggest piece with this is really looking to your baby to tell you that they're developmentally ready to gnaw on different whole foods, because it really, some of those babies that do have a little bit tougher time with the sensory changes within, experiencing different flavors and textures, a concept like this may be very overwhelming to them to, have to chew on something, or really, go from swallowing milk to now having to chew and process, a chunk of food in their mouth, and that can be very hard. I've had, many babies that start choking all of a sudden, and, just get not necessarily a choke that you would have to kind of treat, but, just coughing a lot and just not processing the food very well. So, if you start this type of solid food introduction, really look at your baby and see how they're tolerating it. Are they kind of scrunching their eyebrows up? Are they kind of flaring their nostrils? Look for all those same stress cues that they provide as their baby as well, to tell you that, maybe this is a little bit too much for me. And maybe, go back to like a processed mashed food with some chunks in it, but not a full-blown puree, but, like a thicker consistency that's a little bit easier for them to tolerate. And then, once again, it's a quick process. So in a couple weeks, they may be right back to where you were hoping that they would be. So really letting your baby guide you is so big. So let's say the finger foods are great for your little one. Everything's going well. A couple things to think about. Does it melt in their mouth? So dry cereals and crackers, some melt very easily and some do not. So maybe testing this out yourself before providing that for them. Is it cooked enough to be easily mashed? So they just have gums, and even if they do have a few teeth, it's not enough to really process very chewy foods. So being very well cooked and soft. Things that are naturally soft, so tofu, cottage cheese, they're kind of already in that consistency that they can tolerate. Can it be gummed? Is it small enough? So if you are providing pieces of meat, maybe making sure that they're cut into very small pieces, depending on the texture of what it is you're providing. So just being mindful of how well they're going to be able to process and chew this food. It's very important for keeping that environment healthy and happy for them. Food allergies, another big topic. So we're kind of finding that unless there is a family history of allergies, especially within the immediate family, that we're not finding that there is as much evidence to support delaying a lot of what we perceive as allergenic foods. So they've looked at different countries where we have different guidelines, and they actually found that in countries that did not have the guidelines to delay certain foods for all babies, they actually have lower rates of food allergies, and it's within a similar population. So, with us having these guidelines, maybe it could be somewhat contributing to some of the allergies that we have. And I know one of the questions that we got on the YouTube list was kind of where is this increased prevalence of allergies coming from? And I think that that's the million-dollar question that we always have. But I think that there's a lot that's kind of contributing. One being the concept of the purity that we have. So everything is sanitized. Even our water system is very pure, which has been great, and it's very important to have that because we've got, a lot more healthy, happy people because we have, the water system that we do. But even down to that, really depleting our what's called microbiome, so all the healthy bacteria that we have within our gut. Also, all the medical interventions that we have, the overuse of antibiotics. So there are lots of things that can contribute to really reducing that good bacteria that establishes our immune system, and then that passing down through generations, and really babies kind of getting the microbiome that mom had, or maybe mom had interventions in her birth and baby didn't get a great start on their microbiome. So there's lots of concepts with that, and then really working to try and keep that as healthy as possible, which that can be a whole another topic. But also the awareness of allergies and sensitivities is definitely a big piece in how our rates have gone up, and people being aware of allergies that they have or sensitivities, and then also thinking that a sensitivity is an allergy. So they're a little bit different, and people are very conscious of, oh, I have an allergy to grapes, let's say, and then they move on throughout their life thinking that they had this allergy when maybe it was just a sensitivity. So I think our awareness of what is a true allergy is a little bit off, and then that kind of contributing to our prevalence as well. But definitely a huge topic. Like I said, that could be a talk of its own. So let's say you do have risks within your immediate family for food allergies. These are kind of the guidelines that you will find. So waiting until after a year to introduce milk, wheat, egg yolks, waiting until 2 years for egg whites. So the white part is actual protein, and all allergies come from a protein. So the yolk has got more of the nutrients, the fat, so it's not quite as high up on the list of potentially causing an allergy. And then 3 years for the others listed there. So below you'll see some signs of an allergic reaction and then signs of an intolerance. So that's kind of that allergy versus sensitivity concept that we mentioned before. So it's a little bit different, even though many people perceive them as one. So definitely being mindful of that. But I think speak with your pediatrician, assess your case individually, when it comes to that, because clearly everyone is so different. Here's a list of just some other foods to kind of avoid or keep maybe on the back burner right in the very beginning of introducing solids. Citrus fruits and also fruit juices can be very acidic, so some babies will get kind of painful diaper rashes. You may see a little rash around their mouth. Sometimes they just don't digest them quite as well, so definitely holding back on those. Homemade beets, collards, spinach, they contain high levels of naturally occurring nitrates before 6 months of age. So remember, we're not really starting solids before that time anyway. So keeping that in mind, as long as you're kind of offering a variety in their diet, these foods are perfectly fine to offer your little ones. Their body is able to tolerate that component a little bit more as they get older because they're not quite so immature. So something that you don't necessarily need to avoid unless they're a little bit younger, and then if you're offering it in large quantities very frequently. Honey, we know about honey within the first year for botulism. Raw unpasteurized foods, avoiding added salt, sugars. Once again, they don't have a palate that's similar to ours that requires these extra seasonings. Really keeping it very whole, very basic is a great way for them to learn good foods and good flavors. And the ultimate rule, the biggest take-home message, trying a new food can take many, many times before they're able to really accept and enjoy a food, if you will. 10 to 15 chances. So there are many, many feedings within those 10 to 15 chances that you're offering that food to the baby. So even if they turn their nose up at it once or twice, continue to put that on their plate and expose them to it. So that way we kind of avoid the picky eating stage, which can be very, very troublesome on its own. So definitely keep it going. They're just showing, signs of their senses on their face, not necessarily that they just dislike the food. So keep going. You definitely will find your way if you look to the baby to give you the clues.
And I think that's true even now. My son is 9, and we still, every time we have something, if he didn't like it before, he still has to try it. And he's slowly becoming to like new things, and it's so fun to see. So I love that point, and I think that it does carry on throughout your entire parenting experience, at least when they're young, obviously.
Definitely, yeah, I think it's very important, and I've even got some adults that I'm working with now on this exact thing, so I don't think it ever ends, and maybe, it's a good opportunity for mom and dad and grandma and other friends and families to work on their own palates and expanding the foods that they enjoy, so I think it's a great time of transition for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsey.
Yeah.
Lindsey, thank you so much. Yeah, just was a great presentation. A couple things struck me. I didn't know the history of the rice cereal recommendation, how that came about and became so ingrained, pardon the pun, in our cultural. So I think that was really interesting, and thinking about that there are alternatives to get to some of those minerals is a great one. Also, just was going to chime in as a mom that emphasize your point that what might not be working today might work next week. That's true. I have a 3-year-old, and it's still true. She might really turn her nose up at something now, and then she sees me eating it in a week and is all over that. So yeah. I think just not getting too frustrated or putting too much pressure on yourself or your child is really key.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stop there and ask you questions from some of our listeners, because we actually have a bunch of them pouring in, and I want to have time to get to them. So if I can, I'm going to start right in. The first comes from Richly Designs, who posted, "I'm very interested in baby-led weaning, but my son has food allergies. Despite my very restricted diet, there's something he's allergic to, but haven't narrowed it down yet. What should I start with? Already free of 8 common allergens, and I know he's bad with chocolate, soy, and nuts, but I'm suspicious of corn."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think really, getting the baby's gut to a healthy environment before solids is very important, so that you're not kind of starting them out in a place where they're already kind of having to catch up to whatever that they're having trouble processing or being exposed to. So I think really working with someone to kind of filter through your diet to find the exact food that is kind of contributing to his symptoms, and then working to improve that gut microbiome, whether that's through probiotics or another type of food, and that being through mom's diet as well as babies, depending on where they are in their age. But definitely I think the single foods are the best way to go, making sure clearly that it's cooked, to try and reduce some of those proteins down so that they're more easily digestible. One good thing is to process or mix the food with your breast milk, so that way they're getting those kind of immune boosting properties of your milk, and also the enzymes that help to break down foods are within your milk, so it helps to kind of almost digest the food before he eats it. Another great thing to try. And, I think baby-led weaning is a great concept, but I think looking to your baby to tell you if they're ready for that, as I said before. I think you can kind of have a modified baby-led weaning where maybe you allow them to chew on certain foods, but yet you're offering them kind of the texturized purees, if you will, or texturized mashed foods, if you prefer that, so that they're able to still really learn the process of chewing, and you're able to kind of control a little bit more of their intake. That being, mom has a spoon, baby has a spoon, everybody's trying to get the food in. So it's very messy, but, once again, that great learning process is happening.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsey. I have 2 questions from Laura, and I'll ask the first here and let you respond. She says, "I've tried baby-led weaning, but my baby hardly gets anything into her mouth, even though her dexterity is getting pretty good. Any tips?"
Yeah, and a great follow-up to the previous comment. So, I think that it's great for processing and learning how to, hold and chew and eat whole foods, but also maybe throwing in a little bit of the variety of having some of the texturized mashed foods. And it's kind of like us. We eat crunchy stuff, we eat soft stuff, we eat cooked foods, we eat raw foods, so we eat a variety of textures and taste of foods as well. So, there's no kind of one size fits all for our little ones. They enjoy the soft foods as well, just like we do. So I think maybe throwing in a little bit of that on top of what you're already doing. And then overall, keeping in mind that this period is not about nutrition. It's about learning how to eat, developing those skills. So I think it's great that you're watching your baby, learn how to improve those skills. And I hear lots of great things in your comment. But maybe just throw in a little variety and see how that works.
Great, thank you. This webinar is making me very hungry.
Yeah.
Lauren also wants to know, what is the best way to make baby food green beans?
Green beans. So, once again, you can steam them, and then, you can put some of your milk in that if you prefer to kind of make it a little bit creamier or soft consistency. It's also, if you get certain kinds, it can be very soft. And so, depending on the stage that your baby is at, they might can handle some of those chunks and really enjoy a little bit of the difference in the texture of that versus another soft food. So, if all else fails, I always put a little bit of milk in it. That's my go-to. You can always put a little bit of oils as well. So olive oil, rice bran oil is also very healthy oil. Coconut oil, all great things to add to kind of alter the consistency if it's a little bit too chunky. But yeah, steaming it down is probably the best way. So you want to kind of not have so much water, because then all the water-soluble vitamins can really leach out into the liquid. So like boiling versus steaming. Clearly steaming would be the better choice.
Great, thanks so much. Another question from Anne. She says, I'm a really busy working mom. Which couple of homemade baby foods should I focus on making myself if time is really limited and I can't make them all?
Yeah, very good point. So if you'll kind of remember back to when we were talking about the jar versus the whole food concept, maybe the single foods you can find in a pouch or a frozen variety, and more of the kind of mixed meals or kind of the how else would you call it, the more traditional type meals, maybe focusing on those as being the ones that you prepare yourself, and also controlling the salt and sugar content, the additives, all that is probably where I would focus my efforts, and maybe choosing the single foods as being the frozen or jarred variety.
Great. When I first had my daughter, one of the cool things we did is a group, a new mothers group I was a part of. We actually had a baby food making party. So everybody brought different foods and we got together, and then it was really fun. Like we had a glass of wine and we caught up and we were steaming things and making them, and then we all brought ice cube trays and froze them. And the cool thing is, like, I only had to bring bananas, somebody else brought carrots, but we all went home with a sampling of all the different foods, and that lasted me months. So that was a fun way to do it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And once again, I think really recruiting your helpers, your support people to really help with this, because you've kind of gotten through that newborn stage and everybody's kind of gone on about their way, but they all are, so willing and so happy to help, and to be able to offer them, something that, can really relieve a lot of time for you, and say, I really need this. It makes it that much more enjoyable for them to be able to help out. So definitely recruit your helpers.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to thank you again, Lindsey, for this excellent presentation. And to all of our listeners who watch this after the fact when it's recorded, again, Lindsey's been so kind as to be willing to answer some additional questions you might have in the next day or two. So go ahead, and if you listen to this later and want to follow up with a question or comment on our YouTube page, we will make sure to get that to her and follow up with a response. So thank you again. This has been truly fantastic and I think very helpful. Popular topic. I know a lot of people appreciate us bringing to them today.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I wanted to let you know two things. One is that our next event will be on Friday, June 27th, on another very popular topic that I know a lot of people are going to want to listen in on, which is demystifying cloth diapering. We will be sending out registration info probably later today to get that going and encourage you to sign up. I think that'll be a great one. Nicole and I have also posted a series of all the different events coming up over the next month. I think we have all the way up through November posted now on our website at motherhooduncovered.com. So if you're curious to know beyond the next event what we have coming up, there are some really great topics and speakers that we're going to be bringing. So check that out. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you again so much to our speaker, to Nicole, and everyone that joined us today, and we look forward to talking to you in the next event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.